Hi. I decided to do a weekly blog lesson, or just maybe a weekly blog sometimes, or most of the time I hope that there will be lessons, ideas, tips, whatever you want to call them, just to sort of keep me focused in 2019. I did a similar thing in 2017 where every week I posted a performance video. And there's a playlist on YouTube that you can find with all those songs. And I just want to try something different this year, and kind of for my own benefit as well as anybody that might find it helpful. I don't have a lot of plans exactly, but I'm just going to try to find something that I can convey or talk about each week, and hopefully, like I said, people find it useful. This week I wanted to talk about something that is pretty basic for most advanced players and most intermediate players as well, and something that gets introduced to beginning players early, but oftentimes they forget. And it's really a fundamental idea that will help you put ideas into the guitar and take advantage of the way the guitar is laid out, which if you've studied it for any amount of time, you know that it's a grid and that shapes can be moved around, and you can use the same idea and get a different tonal center with a shape for a chord or a scale or an arpeggio or whatever. And even though the concept is pretty easy for people to understand, some of the basic ways of keeping track of the information that will help you apply is oftentimes forgotten, and sometimes just hard for students to retrieve from memory. So what I want to talk about is just ways of thinking about practicing notes going up and down each of the individual strings using the musical alphabet and the whole and half step pattern. So the first thing that you really have to make sure that you know are the open strings, because that's going to be your reference. So when I talk to my students early in lessons, I say, look, there's only a few things that you really have to memorize, and one of them is the open strings. And so if you don't know E, A, D, G, B, E, make sure that you do, because that's going to be fundamental to anything that you do beyond that. In addition to that, you want to make sure that you understand the musical alphabet. So the musical alphabet starts on A and ends on G, and then starts over again. So it goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then A, and then it keeps going. So that's fundamental, basic information, but sometimes because it's so basic it gets overlooked. So the next thing that you want to understand are how whole and half steps work. Now, the naturally occurring half steps in the musical alphabet are between B and C and E and F. And if you look at a piano keyboard, those two spots, they reoccur, but those two spots have no black key in between them. And so one key to the next is a half step. And on the guitar, one fret to the next fret is going to be a half step as well. So if you just go numerically, 0 to 1 is a half step, 1 to 2 is a half step, 2 to 3 is a half step, and so on. So if a half step is 1 fret, then a whole step would be 2 frets. So that would be, again, numerically, if you wanted to say 1 to 3, that's 1 plus 2 is 3, so a whole step, 1 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 7, and so on. Okay, so if you apply that idea up the neck, starting from the open string at 0 going to 12, which we know is it just starts over at 12, so really that's the information you're containing is 0 to 12. We can take that whole step, half step rule and apply it to the musical alphabet, and we can find every single note that we need to on the neck of the guitar. So for instance, if we start with E, we're going to go to the next note alphabetically is going to be F, and if you think, is that a half step or a whole step, we know that it's a half step. B, C, E to F are the half steps. So E to F is a half step. And then F to G, that's going to be a whole step. G to A is a whole step. A to B is a whole step. B to C is our other half step. Now we've gotten them both for that octave. And then C to D, D to E. And then there's our notes on the first string. So we can do the same thing on the second string, starting with B. We know B goes to C, C goes to D, D goes to E, E goes to F, half step, F goes to G, whole step, to A, and then to B again. So I failed to mention the B to C up here is a half step as well. So you can apply that all the way down to the 6th string. So I'm just going to show you quickly: G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then D on the 4th string, to E, to F, to G, to A, to B, to C, to D. Then we have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then A. And then of course the 6th string is going to be the same as the 1st string: E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E. Now, I have some PDFs that I'll have available. If you click on a link, it'll take you to the website. If you're looking at this on the website, then it'll be in the notes down there, and there'll be a couple of different sheets that you can work on. One is just sort of like a musical survival guide, I call it, with some of the basic information, and then there's a whole step and a half step worksheet for you to kind of like look at. Now, how does this help? Well, obviously, if you need to find a note on this guitar, it doesn't matter if you can read it or not. You can do that if you just start at 0. So if I was to say, hey, find a C on the 1st string, if you didn't know where it was, you just start with E. Think of your whole steps and half steps. So E to F is a half step, F to G is a whole step, G to A is a whole step, A to B is a whole step, and then B to C is a half step, and there's our C. Now, the more you do that, the more of those notes you find, you'll be able to keep track of them a lot more easily, and you'll just start to remember where they are. Now, in a practical sense, the guitar is, primarily in standard tuning played out of 5 positions. The caged positions, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point in this blog series or whatever. And really, in the very, very dime store version of that is that you've got 5 shapes that you can move around the fingerboard. 2 of them have 6-string roots, 2 of them have 5th-string roots. Did I say 2 have 6-string roots, 2 have 5th-string roots, and 1 has a 4-string root. And so if you need to find any idea, whether it's an arpeggio or a scale or a chord on any of the strings, then you just have to know the shape and then be able to figure out where the root is. So for instance, if I said, well, you need to play like the B pentatonic, minor pentatonic on the 6th string, you'd find B, E, F, G, A, B, and if you know your pentatonic minor shape, you can do that. Doesn't matter if you know the notes or not, you can find that shape. Now, we're not really talking about sharps and flats, but if you understand the way sharps and flats work, you find a note that is the non-accidental, and then you either raise it or lower it depending on if you have a sharp or flat. So for instance, if I said, well, find B flat minor pentatonic, you'd go up to B, so we go E, F, G, A, B, and then if it's a flat, you would take it down a half step, and there's our B flat. Now that's going to work with arpeggios, so like if I had a B flat major arpeggio, or I needed a G major arpeggio, I just find the C and then I play the arpeggio, and so on. It's going to work for chords, so here's like a G major chord, there's the root G, there's the shape A, so on. And of course the scale like I just showed you. Now you can do that off of each string. So here's like, for instance, here's a G on the 6th string and there's my major 7 shape. And then if I want to play it on the 5th string, I have to find the G on the 5th string. So I go A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And I know that shape I memorized, which would be a different shape than the one I played, but that's the major 7 shape on the 5th string. And then I have a 4-string root. So we would find G on the 4th string, D, E, F, G, and then I play that major 7 shape. So, I am not necessarily advocating to not understand everything that you're playing when it comes to the individual notes of a scale or arpeggio or chord, but just by the nature of the guitar, you're going to start, coming into these grips and these patterns, and it's a good idea to at least be able to apply them by key if you need to, because that's going to be the most basic way of application. So, I would just practice these ideas, and whenever you learn something, like if it's a 6-string root chord or a 5th-string root scale or a 4-string root arpeggio or whatever it is, just practice playing up the neck, kind of calling out the notes as you go, maybe just like the alphabet, or you could do chromatically. But if you were to do, say, minor 7 on the 6th string, let's say that's a chord you just learned, it's this shape. you could go from the 6th string and you could play F minor 7, and then you go to the next alphabet note, G minor 7, and then A minor 7, and then B minor 7, and then C minor 7, and so on. And you know, the application is what's important. What I find, especially with intermediate guitar players and advanced guitar players, is that they may have a lot of information kicking around, but there's not a lot of usefulness with that, for that information, because they're not applying it. So there's really no substitute for playing songs and you know, playing with other people and that sort of thing. But when you come against a new idea, or come along a new idea, you definitely want to try to just make sure you can play it physically before you do any applying anyhow. And that's a really good way to do things. And you can test yourself, you know, by just, you know, kind of reviewing as part of your practice routine every time you learn something new. Or if you wanted to, you know, just kind of have a diary for your practice, you could say, okay, today I did A, tomorrow I'll do B. And then anything that you know in those, you know, scale-wise, arpeggio-wise, or chord-wise, you could just apply to the B, and so on. So, you know, there's a lot more to it, but I think that this does a good job of distilling the guitar down and giving you an opportunity to apply, because that's what you want. You don't want to have a million chords to memorize like those posters or those books. What you really want is to have an idea of how the guitar is laid out, and then how to take these ideas and these shapes and apply them. I'll say it one more time, you do definitely want to go deeper than that as you advance if you want to, you know, be a little bit more creative with your applications. But in the end, it is vocabulary, and however you can get it in is the way to do it. So I hope this is helpful. If you want to subscribe, it would really be great. And if you want to send me a note, or if you have any comments or questions, or something that you want to me to cover in the upcoming blogs, then just let me know. I really appreciate you taking the time to check this out. Thanks.